Yeah.
Good Tuesday evening, high school sports fans. Joe Gillaway with Linglestown Gazette Sports live from the Orchard Street studio. And this is episode 45 of our weekly podcast, Gazette Sports Chat, where we'll get to know participants from various realms of the high school sports world, the student athletes who play the games, the coaches who coach them, and others connected in different ways to the entire experience. We'll introduce you to tonight's guest in just a moment, as soon as we're done thanking those responsible for bringing you tonight's show. And they are our Linglestown Gazette Sports Platinum sponsors, Rickabaz Electric, Payer Apparel, Ted's Bar and Grill, Freedom Financial Wealth Management, The Tire Mart, Team PA, AAU Basketball, Tonino's Pizza, American Legion Post 272, Hoffman Ford, Capital Region Insurance Agency, Modern Imprint, Sam Hartley Decking, Crystal Bob at Iron Valley Real Estate, and Underdog Sports Bar and Grill. Thank you to these great local businesses for their continued support of Linglestown Gazette Sports and our area student athletes. Okay, so upcoming on Gazette Sports Chat tomorrow night, Wednesday, the 21st, we'll welcome 4 members of the 15-2 and District 3 Class 6A top-ranked Central Dolphins softball team. And they are Bree Locke, Gabby Shirk, Bryn Barkley, and Izzy Rodriguez. They will have their first game Thursday night, weather permitting, against Dallas Town, who Central Dauphin had a bye. Dallas Town beat Penn Manor to move on to the quarterfinals round. Then Monday the 26th, we have a fellow by the name of Dave Sullivan. He's a Steel High graduate, and he's a supporter of the school, and he's looking to lead the charge in trying to generate some donations to get their football field back in order. There's problems there with the field itself. We think probably the bleachers. It needs a lot of attention, Steel High's field. So Mr. Sullivan's going to tell us what he's doing and what he's hoping that the members of the community will kind of rally around the school and the football program and help with. And then we just booked this one. We're excited for this one. Sunday, the 1st of June, that's a 6 o'clock show. Coaches Clay McAllister and Scott Wyatt. And one of the reasons we're having these guys on is because I think they're two of the better coaches in the area and beyond. They're great coaches, but they both coach 2 varsity sports, head coach 2 varsity sports. Coach McAllister, girls basketball and baseball. Coach Wyatt, girls basketball and girls lacrosse. He also is a coordinator or a wide receiver coach on the football team, for the football team. So these are two of the guys that we've been wanting to have on for quite a while, and we're going to finally get them in on Sunday the 1st. So anyway, we'd like to take a moment to send out our condolences to our friend and frequent contributor to this show, Coach Tigh Savercool, along with his girlfriend Whitney and their doggy family, on the loss of their family member Simba. Simba passed away just 2 days ago on Sunday, and tonight's show will be dedicated to Simba. So we know how Coach Savercool is with his doggies, man. They're family members, and he was supposed to join us tonight, and he texted me this morning and just said, "Listen, I'm not feeling it tonight." So this show's for Simba. Let's do a good job, fellas. Anyway, let's introduce the guests tonight on Gazette Sports Chat. I'm joined by an all-star panel, mostly recurring guests, and one new friend who all possess a keen understanding of tonight's topics. And we're going to talk about student-athlete transfers and the competitive inequity often created by allowing schools whose athletes come from only the geographical area their schools serve, competing against schools who in many cases have unlimited access to athletes from neighboring school districts and well beyond that. It's my pleasure to welcome in 6th-year Central York head football coach Jerry Yanchuk, 12th year in his second stint, I think the 3rd year of his second stint, West York head football coach Ron Miller, 17th year Hershey boys basketball coach Paul Blackburn, back again, and veteran high school sports broadcaster, journalist, and one of the best in the state for sure. One of my favorites, Eric Thomas. Welcome, fellas.
Thank you.
Did I get all that right?
Yes.
Eric, are you one of the best guys?
No, not even anywhere close.
Yes, you
not
are.
Even anywhere close.
You're very good. You're very good. So anyway, I'm just going to kind of read a couple things here, and I want the viewers at home to know we're not here to pile up on anybody or anything. We're not here to bash. We're not going to go out of our way to take sides. We're just going to try to kind of dissect, peel a couple layers off this situation and talk about these guys have experience with it. And I guess Eric and I do too from covering sports. But we're going to talk about the controversy over the dominance in scholastic sports, high school sports, of private and charter schools dubbed non-boundary schools by critics, which has been simmering for years. On May 12th, legislation that would tackle the issue began moving in the state house. House Bill 41 would authorize the Pennsylvania Interscholastic Athletic Association to create separate playoff for private and charter schools. The bill was approved by the committee with bipartisan support in a 20-6 vote. It's now awaiting further action before the House. And just an idea, the two main sports that we're typically talking about here are football and basketball. Private and charter schools comprise only 24% of the PIAA member schools, but since 2020 have won 83% of the state championships in boys basketball. Over that period, private and charter schools have won 63% of the state championships in girls basketball, and private and charter schools have won 33% of football championships over the last 5 seasons. 6 of those 10 titles have come in the last 2 years, and 8 of 18 in the last 3 years. In 2021, a private school won the Class A state football title, the only non-public school to win a state championship in the sport that year. This year, private schools won 4 state titles of the 6 classes. So I'm sorry to drag that out, guys, but that's kind of like the nuts and the bolts of why we're here. And we're here to, kind of talk about, first of all, we have to decide whether this really exists. And then we're talking about inequity. Okay. Do the privates and the charters have an advantage, have a competitive advantage, and then why, and what might be the solution? And I think what's interesting here is, and I'm going to start with Coach Jerry Yanchuk and then over to Paul Blackburn. You guys both played in state championship games against private schools, right? Coach Blackburn, you guys were a little more competitive than Coach Yanchuk's team, and that's just the way it happens. I mean, Coach Yanchuk's team played one of the better St. Joe's. There's good St. Joe's Preps teams. There's really good St. Joe's Preps, and then and you ran into one of the tougher ones. Talk about Coach Yanchuk. That was 2020, and the 2020 postseason. Talk about the season you had. Some of the teams that you beat to get there, which were really good teams, and then kind of the feeling that you had yourself going into that state championship game, knowing what you were up against.
Well, to start off with it, Joe, I watched them play in the finals the year before against Central Dauphin. And Central Dauphin would have won another state championship if they were able to play a public school. And I was just kind of like blown away by watching Marvin Harrison, his skill set at 6'4". I was up at Syracuse when his dad was a player there and had a chance to just watch him practice and was so impressed. And then I'm watching his son and going, oh my God. So during the year, I thought, thank God we're not going to have to face them in the postseason. And they beat Archbishop Wood by like 51-0. And I'm like, then I brought that up to our staff and said, man, I would not want to have to play them. So we go through and we're 10-0. We're 6-0 at the end of the season because of COVID. And that particular night, and I knew from watching on film, how good they were. 4 of those guys are now in the NFL, and one was a top 5 draft pick. They are really, really legit. And so that night of the game at Hershey, our administration was they're just trying to stay warm, and it gets cold late there in November, early December. And one of the reporters from the Philadelphia Inquirer was there, and he just happened to be hanging out, trying to stay warm like them in the restroom area. And he said, well, they asked him, what do you think of St. Joe's Prep this year? And his comment was, by far, he said, I've been covering them for 20 some years. He said, best football team they've ever had. Mm-hmm. So we unfortunately played them and we got shellacked. But the one thing I want to say before, and I don't want to say I have answers. I do have a proposal that I've also put by our coaches association, but I really don't have a problem with what they do. I don't, because that's what private schools do. I mean, they got to continue to do what they do and recruit and so forth. My issue stems from Paul and myself having to play them. I'm sure Paul would right now love to have a gold medal around his neck that won a state championship. And I believe in Paul because I know what a fantastic coach he is with the opportunity. We finished number 2 in the state that year and had a very good football team. And it wasn't even close, So, yeah, I have that experience going through that, but that's just my initial thoughts. Like I don't. This isn't me versus St. Joe's Prep or any other school. It's a theory that I have there, and I think they should continue to do what they're doing. But as we go around the panel, I'll share with you at least the solution that I think could possibly work.
Okay, now here are some of the reasons. I think we've probably all heard these reasons. We've heard for the dominance of the privates and charters over the public schools. Stop me when you think I'm just making something up, okay? But this is what I've been hearing for years now. The public schools, they just have to work harder, okay?
Stop.
They have to build better feeder, right? Okay, Eric, you're laughing because that's true, okay? No, I said stop me if you think I'm making it up. I'm not making that up. We've heard that, right?
Yeah.
You got to build better feeder programs, okay? Maybe there's a little bit to that, but it's not. You have to.
Everybody needs to have a better feeder program. All these coaches would say
right.
They wish they had a better feeder program across the board.
The public programs, they have to start training year round. Okay, that's what the Catholics and the charters do. They're trained year round. They have to hire better coaches. You got to hire coaches like the non-boundary schools have. They have to spend more time in the weight room and build better cultures. Okay, I just named like 6 or 7. I hear this all the time, and I think about all the great coaches that I know that coach at public schools and that have won a great deal. And I think, what an insult. Eric, do you hear that same stuff or portions of some of that stuff?
Yeah, but here's where Coach Janchak had to build a culture at one of the toughest schools.
Absolutely.
In the Mid-Penn to build a culture, and that was CD East. And you had success there doing that. Coach Miller had to build his from the ground up. Paul was part of a culture that got built when he played in high school. I mean, the idea that you have to build a culture, I mean, I'm going to be a little blunt here, is bullshit.
Right.
I mean, it really is. Like, it's, come on, culture. You get these kids off the street and you get to put them, and I'm not saying like street, but you take them away from their family, away from vacations, and you give them an opportunity to play a sport. That's a culture. So anybody who uses that, they need to build a better culture thing. The coach thing, that's subject to whatever area you're in.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's kind of
is Gabe Infante going to Fanet Metal to coach football? No. I mean, it's just you have to go and kind of grow your program from within, depending on what part of the state you're in. But I hate that they have to have a culture. There's a culture at St. Joe's Prep. I mean, Tim Broken's become a friend of mine over the last couple of years, and I enjoy being around him and discussing. He gives me, an hour and a half every week leading into a state final every year. But, I mean, they have a culture. Coach has a culture at Central York. Coach Miller has a culture at West York. Paul 100% had a culture at Hershey this past season. Max got a culture at Central Dauphin. Cal's got a culture at Harrisburg. And if you want to go even a step further, the private school culture thing, Jeff Wechter's got a vastly different culture than what Wood or Newman Grady or St. Joe's.
And a great culture. Let's be clear.
That whole
great
culture.
Subjective
and build a better culture. Come on.
So, and then how about I'm going to bring Coach Paul Blackburn in. Oh, come on. This is in air quotes. The public schools recruit too, Joe. Some of them do. Okay. But, you're down there tucked away in Hershey. You played for a high school team. Now, this was many years ago. But, I believe when you played for Carlisle, they were Carlisle kids. And now that you're coaching at Hershey, you're coaching Hershey kids, Derry Township kids, right?
Well, yeah. When I was at Carlisle, I used to walk to school, and the 4 guys I started with, I walked past their house walking to schoschool each day. And I was in kindergarten with a few of them. We grew up together playing all sports together. But at Hershey, I'm along with Jerry and others. I don't hate the player. I just hate the game that we have to play. Like, if we could just all please talk like we do when we talk to other coaches right now. I don't, Eric and Joe, you're not a part of these, but, these kids, today I was on social media and I saw down in Philadelphia, the whirlwind started already with so-and-so's transfer into this school, so-and-so's transfer. All state kids are leaving their school, like the whole thing. And I talk to those coaches too, and they're great coaches and they do their job. If I coached in Philadelphia, I would be doing the same thing they do.
Absolutely.
When we have to compete against the same, like I looked it up, getting ready for this tonight, I looked it up. So in the past 5 years in District 3, there's like 120 teams at all levels in basketball, boys basketball. There's 3 teams that have won 100 games over those 5 years. Cumberland Valley and Reading. Reading's number 1. Cumberland Valley's number 2. They have 2 more wins, and we're the 3rd team. So this just wasn't this year. This is the past 5 years. I've been there 15. We've won a lot of games, and we're a 5A school. We're not a huge school. So when you talk about culture, and in that 5 years, we've only ever had 1 returning starter each of those 5 years. So we've had to recycle Hershey kids, athletes, and different things. My job's different. Let me tell you what they do in Philadelphia, the honest truth. They have to go to Competitive Edge or wherever the top 100 8th graders are and get them enrolled at school. They have to make sure that they choose to go to their school. I don't have that option. I don't do that in the fall, in the spring. I have my kids out playing AU and doing different things. Like, my job is different, but we have to compete against each other at the end. Newman Goretti, Carl Argel, I've known him since '99. We talked about that at length. Wonderful person, wonderful coach, legendary down there, has done a terrific job. He had 3 all-state kids. There was one.
You froze up, Coach.
Carl might have pulled the plug on him there, huh?
Maybe. Well,
I would also like to go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, but I was just going to say, these are things that when I go to Spooky Nook and I run into people, they'll say, "Hey, great run, Paul. Good job. Boy, ran into a real buzzsaw." That's weird. All those kids are from other states. This one came from Delaware. This one came from New York. This one came from Maryland. These aren't things I'm making up. These are factual.
Right.
These are things there. And I don't begrudge them, but we had to play against them. And you know what? Going into the game, I stand by my statement. I don't control any of that. I control our Hershey kids. We played our hearts out. We were up 7.5. We didn't play well enough in the 3rd. They played well in the 4th, and they beat us. And you know what? They were better than us. But their days are different than our days. It's a different culture.
Right.
It's totally different culture.
Coach Ron Miller, let's bring you in, buddy.
And I think to add to that, what my concern is, as the people right above us in the college level, you see the NIL, you see the facilities, you see all of that. Within that culture of public or private and charter schools, I believe there's an arm race going on there as well. And what I mean by that is Ricky Waters and LaShawn McCoy they've played with guys from Archbishop Wood, and they've played, and you'll start to see these other professional athletes becoming general managers at their former schools. To me, these schools are really, we talk about a youth program. Well, I'm sure both of the coaches would agree with me. We'd have a fantastic youth program if we can hold, this wonderful camp and use the whole state. Geographically, I'm bound by boundaries within a very small district in York County. Okay, that's what I'm handed. And no one is faulting them. It's just a different game. So we have to compete for championships with a group of people that it's not feasible. It doesn't make any sense.
You have who you have.
All of those stats at the beginning of your introduction, and there's your reasons. It just doesn't make any sense to me that we have to compete. And again, you're talking, this goes back to 2012. I had a 13-0 wagon, and we went up and competed greatly, and a play here and a play there. We beat McDevitt. Our gift would have been Erie Cathedral Prep, who beat McDevitt by 50 points. 50. Turned around and got whooped by Archbishop Wood. So now what? Wood goes up, and look what's happening with them. They can't compete with St. Joe's right now. They are the Alabama of 6A. Well, McDevitt, they got to do what they got to do to compete with Erie. Those guys will kick it in. So it just doesn't make sense.
So let's thank you, Coach. Let's talk, and I'm going to bring Eric back in because I know you have an understanding of this. Before people get too excited, the people that would like to see the non-boundaries and boundaries split in the postseason, talk about what is HB or House Bill 41 and where is it in the process?
So they last year, the Housing Commerce Committee in Pennsylvania voted for it, which is, and the biggest thing people have to remember about this, what's going on here, if they pass this bill through, I think it was started by Scott Conklin, who's out of Center County, it's not changing anything. So the reporting has to come from the guys like Chris Harlan or our friend Eric Epler, or whoever's going to do these stories. The reporting has to come on two levels here. Number one, does the PIAA even do they want to change the current format? My sense would be they probably are going to look at it extremely close, obviously, but I think they kind of do, because otherwise this would have just died with one quick, no, don't do this. We're happy with where it is. Leave it as is. They're only right now voting on the ability to give the PIAA the chance or the opportunity to change the format if they want to. Nobody has talked to Bob Lombardi about whether they really want to. Nobody has talked about what their next steps are. PIAA is just kind of sitting back and saying, let all this stuff kind of work itself out in the government side of things. And then once it does and it gets to us, we'll take it to our board. We'll have a meeting for it. We'll probably have about 15 meetings of it. We're going to have to pull our schools from around the state. I know there's numbers out there if you dig. I think Capital Wire had a good piece on it last year about how many schools across the state would be for it, and it's an overwhelming split the thing up. But there's going to have to be an official, whether it be athletic directors, district chairman, whoever they go to. So we don't even really know if they want to do this. But the thing floating around right now is just simply to amend the rule from 1972, which was amended from 1949, that in 72, when they said the public schools and the private schools can compete together in championships, and then all of a sudden you started having more classes added, more sports added, things like that. And then we don't get the Philly teams anyway until the 2000s as is. But it's only giving the PIAA the ability to change the format if they want to. This does nothing to actually change it. And I think that's the biggest misconception you see on, some of these forums or social media. Oh, they voted to change. No, they didn't vote to change anything.
Right.
It's
Eric,
not. We don't even know if they will.
Right.
Can I ask you a question, Eric? Do you think that if it would pass through, this is further than it's gone, I'm told, ever. So at least we're moving forward with it.
Yeah, it died on the table like that the last 3 times.
So let's say it goes all the way through to where the governor signs it and it's all the way through. Do you think, and the PIAA has the opportunity to do so, are they still, you think, fearful of litigation and things if they try it, that they would even try it? Because I'm told, if they bring this up, there's been threats of people, suing.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always going to be that, Coach, but I think the bigger issue for the PIAA is, and listen, I don't care. I'm like you guys. I don't really care what some of these schools do. I'm doing the same thing if I'm St. Joe's or Wood or Goretti or whatever. I really don't care. Now, selfishly, because I get to be involved in these at a playoff and a championship level, yeah, I want to see the best teams. I wanted to see you guys play Newman Goretti. I wanted to see some of that talent. I want to see, I wanted to see Bo Prabula go against Jeremiah Trotter. I want to see those top guys selfishly. But I think the bigger fear is if they let this go through and they do switch it, what then happens to public schools? You guys all coach at public schools. It's going to be open season on all of your athletes. And I truly believe that it is now, right?
I'm protecting. I have an all-state guard that's getting calls from prep schools in South Carolina, and there's other schools local, and they're not local.
It's going to get worse.
Our area's not recruiting them.
It's going to get worse if they do this, because then you're going to now create, depending on how they do this, if they keep it at 6 and you have 2 private school classifications, I don't think they could have 1, because, certainly a York Catholic can't compete even like at a McDevitt level, let alone a St. Joe's or an Archbishop Wood level. No offense to York Catholic, but I think we all understand what I mean by that. So you're going to have 2 classes there. You're creating essentially what is a super conference or a super class if you have what would be a 2A or maybe a 6A as far as private schools go, with Wood, St. Joe's Prep, MOTEP. If you throw the charters in there, I think you have to group them all together. McDevitt's, schools like that.
I do too.
They're going to cherry pick everybody at that point. And that's where the PIAA's got to have this plan in place. Like, Philly's the Wild Wild West now with these guys going back and forth. It's going to get worse if you separate these two. As much as they think it would help the public schools, these legislators who maybe they have a kid that plays, this is why government should never be involved in anything, because they don't understand what is going to happen to some of these public school kids. I went to an elementary school, and I'm speaking just from a Catholic school perspective. The youth program at my elementary school, and I am not upset about this, but it's just disappointing on one hand, wiped out because of the Central Penn Crusaders. There's no Holy Name of Jesus Jets football team anymore because of the Central Penn Crusaders. Mm-hmm. There's several Catholic schools that don't have a program now because now they all go to Central Penn Crusaders. That's what you're looking at if you open this thing up and you separate these two. I think I know everybody wants this like fairness and stuff, but they got to be super careful in how they do this and how they police this if they split these things up.
Yeah, I already have an 8th grader at the Central Penn Crusaders, and that's been his dream.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, McDevitt has gone a little bit further the last handful of years. Not that they've never gone outside of Dauphin and Cumberland counties, but now it's Lancaster and York, and they're really starting to build the territory that they bring the players in. I have a question for Coach Janchuk, and you're probably the ideal person to address this situation. You teach and coach at Central York, and has grown into one of the top sports schools in the state. Okay. Anybody that knows sports and knows, Central York, boys sports, girls sports, the popular sports, the less popular sports, you guys are good at just about all of them, winning state championships, district championships. And there's a lot of parents that have lived in the city, in the inner cities for many, many years. And I think one of the American dreams is to try to get to the point where you can move your children out to the suburbs. So I know that you guys, your school gets some of the York City kids, and these are legitimate, just trying to build a better future for their kids and all that. What is a valid legal transfer? I mean, I'm sure sometimes you catch wind that a certain kid, the family's looking to, relocate out your way. What do you have to do in those situations to make sure that you're following the rules set forth by the PIAA?
I'm glad you brought that up, Joe, because I actually had a parent 2 years ago from the state of Maryland call me. It was almost comical. She's like, "So how's your quarterback room look?" I said, "I got some nice pictures up on the wall." And I knew where she was getting at. And she goes, "Well, my son loves your offense. He had been watching Bo and figured he should play there. Well, I'd like you to have him come up and you work him out in private lesson." I said, "No, ma'am." I said, "That's not how I do things, Joe. Have we had kids move in over the years? Yes. Okay. Have we had some kids leave? Yes. But what I'll tell a parent is, would we have an excellent school district? We do. Ron will tell you that, but I'm not recruiting any kids. So if 3 kids came in this summer, I don't anticipate that, but if they did, they would have to get enrolled. They would have to do everything. I won't talk to them because that's me recruiting. And I don't want to do that. I've had kids reach out and say, "No, you're an awesome young man. Play for where you're at." And I don't want to do that. I know Ron would probably.
We dealt with it. You and I had that. We had a young man that had no idea, but you reached out. You reached out to me about a young man that you ended up doing it the right way. But yeah.
Yeah. And I just said, no, I said, "Coach Miller, you need to play there." And that young man, I think, will play in the NFL someday, Ron, because I think he's really gifted. And he was really good friends with Bo. And I'm like, "I am not talking to you." I said, "I just want to wish you luck." And that's how I do it, guys. It's just as Paul said, guys are plucking all the time. I mean, I have a tremendous quarterback in the rising 9th grade. And I know there's schools from all over the eastern part of the state trying to take them from us. So that's what it is. It's not like I'm reaching out across the state trying to, recruit a quarterback. That's not what I'm going to do. So like Paul said, you got what you have. I remember one time when I was growing up, Berwick had out that run. And
Palace.
What's that?
You talking about Palace?
Well, no. So more or less.
Oh, that run. You said run. I thought you said run. Okay. My apologies.
Similar to Southern Columbia now, where I don't know, but everyone would say, "Well, George is putting him in the potato chip factory." Well, if the parent wanted to move in there because his kid could play 15 more games, how do you blame the kid? So a lot of those schools recruited Berwick. I don't think it's like George went to Philly and and tried to do that. God rest his soul. So I think that happens sometimes. Some of the better schools. I'm sure Paul could get some kids in if they could afford to live in Hershey. It's an expensive school district. So, but wouldn't they love to play for you, Paul? No question.
Well, here's my pitch. We're a top 10 school in the state as far as academics. We've got a wonderful corridor there with wonderful places. Our housing is beautiful for all levels. There's plenty of job opportunity. Just come on in for any reason. If you can play the flute, if you can play basketball, come on into Hershey. We love it.
Parents, if you want to speak to Coach Blackburn after the show, we'll connect you with him.
I gave Paul one nice soft set there, volleyball set. He crushed
Thanks, Joe. You won on that.
So,
but I there was like an analogy that I was thinking of, though, seriously, that, leading into this too, is that, why is college football, and college athletics had a little more parity? Because they've evened out with NIL a little bit. Why doesn't Alabama dominate the way as you do? Because those players they used to get, legal or illegal, it was a different playing field, because college coaches would complain about that all the time. Well, now it's kind of leveling out depending on your fundraising. If you do open it up, open season, let me recruit. Let the public speak. Like, I guess I think we're all on the same page. Like, there is a difference, but we don't know what the solution is. Well, look at other states. How do they get past some of our problems, whether it be litigation, whether it be the private schools getting all the talent and draining the public schools? This model is successful in other states. Like, I was just on Google this afternoon, after my work hours, not trying to get in trouble. It was after school, but I was Googling, different, programs that were, in states that had the separate, and there are solutions to it, and there are successful models. We have great athletes in Pennsylvania. We have great school districts. We have great private institutions. We have great opportunity, religious, non-religious, prep, charter, whatever it is. There's so much going on. But the system is set up that there's an inequity that has gone on for too long that eventually has to change, but we have to have solutions. So I guess my question to you guys, what is a solution other than waiting for this bill to possibly pass and waiting for the PIAA? Is there things we can do within our own? Like,
you're hired, Coach. I was going to ask that same question.
Well, if you find a problem, and we do have a problem, it's easy to say we have a problem and say, hey, it was great talking with you guys. Yep, we got a problem. And then we all, What are some solutions? What's out there that's successful?
Anybody want to? Let me just, I just want to read a little factoid I put together here. As good as Harrisburg was last year, Harrisburg football, Class 6A, they were no better than the fourth best team in the entire state. Okay. St. Joe's Prep, LaSalle College, and Pitt Central Catholic were definitely better than them. Possibly by the end of the season, McDevitt was also better than them. Possibly. Harrisburg beat McDevitt, wide left field goal, week 2 or something like that. And maybe even Roman Catholic, who took McDevitt. So Harrisburg was really, really good, very talented last year. And they might have been the 6th best team in the state with 5 private schools better than them. I'm just trying to paint a picture here. Am I wrong there? I mean, they definitely were no better than the 4th best team. If there's anybody Harrisburg people watching, they're not going to be happy with me saying that McDevitt might have been better than them by the end of the season. But the point is, that's how imbalanced it is when you're not talking about, it's just St. Joe's Prep. It's a St. Joe's Prep problem. It's not a statewide problem. Well, if St. Joe's Prep is somehow pushed aside or somebody catches up with them or passes them by, there's going to be other teams that are going to take St. Joe's Prep's place, I think. So anybody have a solution?
I got one that I'd like to at least share. And the reason why I'm saying this is I brought it to our state coaches association, and they actually liked it. So what I looked at was, and part of this comes back to when I coached in New Jersey, Joe, because they had the separate private.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well, here was my theory. And I looked today, I kind of did my homework like Paul was doing, and I looked at all the single A, double A, I went all the way up through in the private. So this is what I suggested. Originally, I thought very similar to what Eric said, have a big school and small school private A, or 7A and 8A, where 7A would be the 1, 2s, and 3s, and 8A would be the 4, 5, and 6. But after doing the numbers at the top, that wouldn't work. So because it's an imbalance. So I think if you did what I had down was having a one public, or I'm sorry, a one private, a two private, and a three private, with the one private being the A and double A, the two private being the triple A and quad, and then the 3A being the 5A and 6A. But then with that being said, okay, so how do you change it up with the public schools? Trim that number. We don't need 6 classifications. I would go 5 classifications. So that could give you still 8 teams overall instead of 6, but then you'd break it up enrollment wise. So maybe Ron is able to play 4A for a public state championship and not have to play any of those guys. Because again, as I said before, if that's what they do, great. But if we could do that, I believe we would have been a state champion. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's just my opinion, but at least I'd have an opportunity to put it out on the field. So why do you have to separate them? And I'm sure Paul would say the same thing. He would have been the 5A state champion. And maybe in basketball, because of the number of teams, I don't know, Paul, maybe you do 4 classifications like they do at the postseason, like with lacrosse and the other stuff. And then maybe have 2 private state championships, because then you still allow them to have what they want. Now that'll piss off some of the schools that are really good. Like you just mentioned 5 tremendous schools, but let them play each other off, because then they're going to knock each other off. And that's not going to make them happy, the private schools, but that's what's fair if you're really talking about opening up and being able to have a public versus private. So they actually, Ron, looked at that and kind of voted. I thought, well, that's a pretty good idea. And I was just trying to figure out how you could separate so you wouldn't have to do that. So that was just my take. And I'm sure it could be cleaned up quite a bit, but I don't think you would need 6 classifications in football once you separate. And I don't know, Paul, again, I don't know how your numbers shake out if you would truly need 5 in basketball, if you could knock that down to 4. Just some thought.
Okay.
Yeah, interestingly enough, we talked about that in basketball, meaning just myself and other coaching colleagues would talk about what it would look like if allowed, if the PIAA would allow it. And similar, you said, go back to 4 classifications for public school with the numbers, and then have 2 private up there. So it would be a total of 6. So anyway.
Coach Miller?
I think it's a great solution. And I mean, it's worked in New Jersey. How long has it been like that, Coach?
Always. It just
I mean, I've had teammates. I've coached Wagner College in my recruiting area, so it just seems natural. And I think the thing too, I really, Eric, your point about them really, I guess, deflating or dropping our talent pool for a little bit. I agree. I think there would be an initial, oh man, because if they were all playing each other at that high level, like Jerry said, they're not going to like that. And there might be a little bit of an arms race, so to speak, and they'll cherry pick. But I really think then, going back to the analogy with college, people will start saying, okay, this is my niche. And I think it will kind of just naturally balance itself out and become just more of a level playing field, but just more tranquil, I guess, because now it's just chaotic. And I truly believe what I said earlier in the conversation. I think you're going to start seeing these schools amp their facilities up. I think you're going to start seeing different things happening that you're like, what is happening here? And I quite frankly think it's just the arms race that's going to be taking place. But that fits with Jerry's model, and what Coach said just fits naturally in both sports. And I think wrestling's another sport that I unfortunately think gets left out of this. But we're a dominant wrestling state, dominant. The sad thing is, it's Bethlehem Catholic, it's Bishop McCourt. It's those schools, and then that's Eric. That's, I think, where your example shines the brightest right now. Currently, is those schools, and what it does do is hurt the schools that say, wrestling's hard enough to recruit for, and for my sport in particular. I know basketball guys like, but he understands there are those kids out there that would be a great avenue to offer another sport for them to achieve something great. And I think we lose a lot of great athletes. They're just like, why am I going to put myself through that, especially wrestling, and I have to go wrestle somebody from Bethlehem Catholic and the kids from South Jersey?
I think you're going to see, Coach. You're exactly right about the race for facilities. I mean, McDevitt just put that news out last week about the new facility they have coming. How many schools though have donors like that?
$20 million, and
that family has earned every penny that they have, and that's their right to give it away. I mean, I commend them for what they're doing, but how many schools have that? Look at what Central Dauphin built with Jeff Swaggart there. And their wrestling room's the same junky one that we had when I was at the old high school there.
Sure.
It's not anything like brilliant or whatever. There's no donor. Trust me, if I win the lottery tomorrow, I'll give you guys a cut too for your schools. But I'm giving $20 million to my alma mater so they can build something there. I mean, there's no question about that. But not all these schools are going to have the luxury of that kind of stuff, and not all the schools are going to have the parents who like a Marvin Harrison or a Jeremiah Trotter, or, as we get a little further away, Kevin Jones went to Strathaven and who was the running back at St. Joe's Prep that's still in the league now. These guys are all going to be kicking back into these programs too. And the money is just going to become, the money's going to separate if it goes the direction of like separating these, and I want everybody to have a fair chance to win. Don't get me wrong, but if you separate these and it becomes like that arms race type thing, what schools have the lineage to get the money from people to build these facilities to get these kids to come in there then? I mean, Pitt Central has it out here in Pittsburgh.
Sure.
McDevitt obviously has it with the Ortenzio family backing them. You could look at maybe Harrisburg, when Micah's done playing, maybe he gets a little philanthropical and donates money back or something. But not everybody has that. So where's that all coming from? Where are they, like it's just like the Nike Under Armour thing. Like if you're an Under Armour school, you were hip 20 years ago, but if you're Nike now, you're the in thing. Like everybody wants to wear the Nike stuff and the Jordan stuff and all that. So if you become one of those schools, you're hip. Everybody wants to play with you and wear your swag and all that kind of stuff. Well, the schools are going to be the same way now. It's going to be the trickle down effect from the college thing, except we're not going to be, buying the players with NIL. We're going to be putting what would amount to the NIL money into building a $20 million facility that has an indoor practice field or something in it.
Just to give the viewers an idea of how difficult it is to have money approved in a public school district. Okay. Coach Janchuk, you had a daughter who went to Central Dauphin, played field hockey at a very high level, played in the state championship game. Her field was grass. The ball would just roll it would just die, right? Central Dauphin was one of the last remaining schools in the area. There's even, let's just say, poorer school districts that transitioned over to a turf field, an artificial turf field. I attend or watch these school district meetings, either on Zoom or in person, and these taxpayers were going nuts about allowing Central Dauphin High School and Central Dauphin East each have one turf field. Okay, these aren't extravagant. These aren't total stadiums. These are turf fields with one set of bleachers,
multi-purpose.
Multi-purpose: soccer, field hockey, lacrosse. Okay, I mean, are they essential? No, it's not like food or water. But then you have $20 million, and if I'm McDevitt, I'm taking it. I'm hugging. I'm kissing. I'm whatever. I'm loving it. But they get a $20 million donation, and it's like pulling teeth to get these fields that are so necessary or so. I'm trying to stay away from necessary, but you guys know what I'm talking about. I would go to a soccer game on a Monday night at Central Dauphin and watch the ball just kind of roll to a stop, and it would just die on this thick grass. Then they'd have a game a night or two later at Landis Field on the artificial surface, and the ball would roll around completely differently. It would be like two different sports, right? Almost, one version of soccer.
I feel safe telling this story now, but one of the people back when I was calling the Central Dauphin games when I lived in Harrisburg told me that they had a proposal to get turf on their, at Central Dauphin High School. I don't know if you guys all know this or not, but they have two football practice fields. There's a lower one that's like a pit one, kind of like the old McDevitt field. It's a little dingy and sort of like nothing to it. And then there's an upper one that's around all the fields that are in that upper part of the campus, like where the weight room is. And then you have like your softball field and everything like that. Coach Janchuk probably knows this. They had a proposal to get the turf put on both the fields there, both the practice field and the upper field. And the company, if I remember the story correctly, the company offered a discount to the district to get East a beautiful turf field on their campus. So something away from Landis Field, so they could maybe cut back on sharing a little bit. But they needed to. They told the schools, like, you have to raise the money to get the field. The Central Dauphin's like, all right, fine. They went and they pretty much had their stuff wrapped up. East couldn't find any funding for it. School district said no way. And this was years ago. This is probably about 9-10 years ago now, maybe. But I mean, that's you're talking about, Joe, the issues that some of these schools go through to get a facility, or especially like at a public school. This isn't drop. T. Boone Pickens ain't giving Central Dauphin $30 million to build a football field. It's not happening like that there, and that's not.
Yeah.
That's going to put these public schools at a disadvantage. I mean, at some point, St. Joe's Prep's going to have state-of-the-art something somewhere. I don't know where those guys. I forget where they practice, but they're sometimes having to drag themselves outside the city to go somewhere decent, depending on weather. But at some point, these facilities and these donors are going to be kicking money into these private schools, and it's going to create an even bigger disadvantage.
Right.
At Hershey, there's absolutely no signage, if you see, because we don't allow that from our district's level. So you might want to say, hey, Hershey Foods would like to donate X. Nope. No, you can't put your sign up here. Coca-Cola. Nope. Anything like that. Every district is different in how they manage those things. Yep. And there's reasons we do that. And I'm not part of that's above my pay grade, definitely. But there's different challenges, financially. And then we have our own boosters. I know that Jerry, we were at Lebanon, we didn't have our own boosters. There was the overall athletic boosters. Every public school, private has to raise their money. They have, an open slate. And if you're lucky enough to have that, you can take advantage of that. There's public schools, to your point. It's very difficult to come up with money sometimes to upgrade and shine what you have.
So go ahead, Coach Miller.
I was just going to say quickly, and the unfortunate thing, and it's okay. We were all that age too. Flash sells. We see it all the time. It's constant, right? It's constant. And those big stadiums, I'm sure the stadium now with the LED lights and they'll be able to show that bubble. And that's why a young man from West York, it's been his dream to play at McDevitt. How am I going to fight with that when the same scoreboard's there since 1978 at West York? How? Yeah.
I have a cousin who teaches at Woodrow Wilson in Camden, New Jersey. I think they just changed the name to East Side. She went to Camden Catholic in Cherry Hill. She was a very good basketball player decades ago, many years ago. And I kind of follow her. We stay in touch. And her high school, Woodrow Wilson, won a state championship in football maybe 5 years ago now. And I said to her, I said, oh, man, I said, how do the people feel knowing that you guys won as a public school and you might not have beaten the cat? I was just kind of trying to get her take on how the average person in the state of New Jersey, she goes, they don't even think about that stuff. We're a state champion, and the team that won the Catholic or the private school title are a state champion. She goes, there's no argument. She goes, I'm not saying that there's nobody, but we feel like we're state champions. Nobody's telling us we're not. And the private schools, whoever won that, feel the same way. So the argument I heard is, well, they're going to know who's really the state champion. Let's just say Central York won in 2020 and St. Joe's won their own championship. It doesn't matter what anybody thinks. Right. It just really doesn't matter. And if that's the sentiments now, it's going to subside. It's going to go away. And again, what matters most is to those intimately involved, and that's the players and the schools and the coaches and the fans, and whatever anybody else thinks about that whole thing, it's immaterial, Well,
I think too that we're talking at the state level and equity. Let's just go within our league, and you're playing against somebody in your league, and you're like, oh man, we have to play those people twice a year, or in football once a year, home or away. And you're like, wow, they're able to do these things that I'm unable to do just at the local level. And you're getting beat by them continually. And you're like, okay, well, I'm out of my league. At least I made districts. Now you go to districts, you're like, oh boy, now I'm playing another, a school that has different rules than I play by. And now you're in districts, you're like, wow, we could have really advanced in districts, or maybe won our league, or maybe, and you're always felt inferior. And then when one of your own players goes to that school and then they're playing against your public, the kids they grew up with, there's a lot of intangibles and emotions that coaches go through. I've been through the whole range of them through my whole career, to the point of, well, when in Rome, do the Romans do. I'm going to start recruiting, So you go out and then you're like, well, I don't like doing that. Then you go to, well, I'm just going to raise my own, et cetera, et cetera. And then people are like, you hear all the things you led to show off with, get better, do this, do that. And then you go to the state level. And then you get up there, you're like, wow, this is a whole different ball game up here, a high level of what's going on. I just would love to see either us allowed to operate in the same fashion that the rules would loosen, or separate us. I just would love to see that.
I want to, before we move on, I want to recognize some of these people that come in here. They watch this all the time, this show, and they make comments, and some of the comments are questions. Kirby Lentz, hello. Thanks for watching. Justin Core, thank you. Dave Berman said, Eric Thomas, like always, on point. That was a while ago. You made a good, you must have made a good point.
Checks in the mail, Dave.
Yeah. Lewistown Lady Panther basketball. The PIAA cites the 1972 law as the reason that the boundary and non-boundary schools cannot be separated. In reality, the 72 law simply called for private schools to be admitted into PIAA as members. They went on, Ladies Panther basketball went on to say, this 2025 change, if ultimately enacted, would just put the onus on the PIAA to change if they would like to, if they feel they should. The legislation would also appear to insulate the organization from lawsuit peril. Some really smart takes there. Dave Berman, try living down here with all the transfers, especially Chester High School boys hoops.
Here he goes.
Okay. Jay Rott's very interesting takes. Tyler Heist, it's the truth. I guess everything we're saying, and Tyler agrees with. Jay Rott said, if I had a solution, I'd have offered it a long time ago. And then he said, here's my thought. So Harrisburg might have been the 5th or 6th best team in the state behind 4 or 5 private schools. Let's make the change, adjust the classes, and Harrisburg wins that state title. How long is it going to take until the party line is, well, there are 4 or 5 schools that are better? Well, that's what we just addressed. It doesn't matter. Jay said this before I just made that comment, that some people are going to never be satisfied, and they're going to say, well, they're still not the best. Devin Pollock, interesting question here. If this bill is passed, what would happen with public schools that are in a co-op sporting agreement with a non-boundary school and vice versa? I think there's probably very few of that scenario in existence. Would you see these co-ops ending? And then Lowell Rickard said, Paul is right on the money. That's why he's on the payroll, Lowell. Paul, thank you. You're right on the money. Either let public schools recruit like the privates or separate, says Lowell. So that's every one of them. Thank you, everybody, for chiming in and following the show. Anything there that anybody wants to comment on?
I think the other thing we got to look at too is how many times this idea of separating these has been. They looked at this in 2007, which was 4 years or 3 years after the public schools in Philly got into the PIAA, and right before the Catholic League schools got in. I think 08 was the first year. LaSalle, I think, had played in the first time that they were eligible to play in a state championship game. I think they played in that in 08. So they looked at this in 2007 and they said no. Then they shot it down again in 2012. So now all of a sudden, like, what's changed? And I saw a couple stories that were saying, well, the balance of power, like in the state house, was shifted one way or the other. I mean, everybody has to drag politics into something. That has nothing.
I think it's a bipartisan situation, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, everybody in that state house and state senate is going to be affected by it in some way or another. I saw guys that voted. I read who voted against this on the Commerce Committee, and I don't know if the one person that voted against it has kids that are in a private school that doesn't care. I don't know if the other 24 have kids that are in a public school that are affected by it. I don't know. But I just find it interesting that right away in 07 they said no, and then 5 years later in 12 they said no. And I think the other thing, Joe, you and I talked about this a little bit this morning, going back and forth, but the gap is, there's a perception that the gap in football is larger than what it really is. It's like 12-9 in favor of the private schools when I say private, I'm referring to like the Philly schools. So you're talking like your Emoteps, your Woods, your St. Joe's Preps.
Non-boundary.
Non-boundary, right. It's a better way to put it. It's like, I think since we went to 6 classes, I think it's 12-9 in favor of the private or the Philly schools. And one of the 9 is McDevitt, who beat a Philly Catholic League school just last December. So you can take that for what it's worth. But is the perception blown up too much just because nobody can beat St. Joe's Prep? Is that why we have this perception, or is it actually like an issue? And I think too many people on the surface are like, well, this is just an issue because it's St. Joe's Prep. Look at the basketball finals this year. My goodness. I mean, everybody in there was it's not just because St. Joe's Prep is good in football. Like that's not the issue here. But some people think that it's because they are this unbeatable entity. They've lost twice, by the way, in state finals to public school. Well, once to a Catholic and then once to a public school, or twice to public school.
Pine Richland and
Pine Richland. That's right. So it's 2 public.
Yeah. And I think they were kind of anomalies. I mean, Mount Lebanon, that was that team. I think we all had a feeling that Mount Lebanon was going to beat them that year. That was supposedly that team that they all were together since they were 8 years old. They played together for 10 years. Very, very senior laden. And
they built a culture. They built a culture.
They built a culture. There you go. And then Pine Richland had one of the top quarterbacks in the country that year. And they beat them. Okay. But I still say that's an anomaly. And I still say that, like you said, is it a St. Joe's problem? St. Joe's Prep problem only? No, because again, Harrisburg's probably at least. I'm not going to go back and forth. Were they the 4th best or the 6th best? They had 3 better private schools ahead of them this year that were all better than them. You know,
and I think the 12-9 number is a little skewed. Yeah, I don't think. I think the
some of them are Emotep, and some are in the lower classifications too.
Exactly, and I think that lower classification, I think the weight of that, I think that's almost like are you taking an AP course or are you just taking the college prep course? To me, I think that is a much more balanced playing field. I know you have Southern Columbia, and that's its own anomaly because you have. I'm a Mount Carmel guy, so I get the winning thing in state championships, and then 15 miles away is Southern, and there's another 15 is Berwick, and then when all those people move to Southern, well, this is what you get. But I just think that's just an anomaly. That's not recruiting. This is just, I don't know.
Mount Carmel is the only school to win state championships representing 2 different PIAA districts. I just knew that, so I threw it out. That's a great trivia question, even though I posed it as just a statement. But how about that? I think District 11 the 1 year, and then what are they in now? 4? Is it 4? Yeah. So let's go around District the horn, 4. Give everybody a moment for a final take. Coach Miller, do you have anything else you want to say?
I just think it's a time where I think we've hit a threshold, and I think change is coming. I think the fact that the vote was a little bit wider of a margin, there just seems to be a little bit more of an awareness, and maybe shame on us a little bit. Maybe we don't communicate enough with our local representatives to actually tell them like the uneven playing field that we truly are. And there's nothing wrong with what Jerry talked about with having different state championship classifications. But I think it's being maybe presented a little bit improperly. And I think it's been presented that way for so long that people are just like, oh, it's public schools bitching again. They'll get quiet for another 5 years and then it'll come again. And that's all. But I think these conversations are important to have. And I really, really appreciated the guest from Lewistown that brought up some really good points. And I think that's what we need more of, more education.
Okay. Thank you, Coach Miller. Coach Jerry Yanchuk, any final takes?
Yeah, mine is, Joe, that, people are afraid to change sometimes because it's uncomfortable. But you got to make change to grow, and to be able to do what you have. You can't stay stagnant. And Paul hit it right on the head. Then let us recruit too and do what we have to do, or make some change. But it's just easy to push on the side. Say, well, build a better program. That's the most crap thing I think I've ever heard. And I heard that live that time when that came out. That's embarrassing to all the kids that have busted their rear ends.
You better believe it.
That was basically a slap in the face to any athlete who's ever worn an athletic uniform in the state of Pennsylvania to make that comment. So I do think they have to do something. And the last part of it, it's just like the NIL in college. They know they have a major problem right now, fellas. How about it? And what are they going to do? And, that's for another day, that discussion, how that affects high school. But yet there has to be some change done at our level. I really believe that.
Thank you. Coach Paul Blackburn, any final takes, thoughts?
Yes. Well, Jerry and I were phys ed teachers together at Lebanon for a few years. So by trade, we get people to do things they don't want to do. So you know what I mean? We have to encourage people and find ways to motivate people. And that's what we do. And I think that helps us in our coaching life as well. And we have to recruit also the kids walking the halls that we have. And that's very hard sometimes, working with other coaches and saying, hey, can you find time for some basketball? Can you find time for some football? Can you find time between all the other sports and activities that we do? So as public school coaches in our situation, we're really doing a lot of recruiting, whether it be our day job or whether it be coaching. And I think they should let us expand our horizons a little bit. Let us recruit as some of our brethren do on the other side. I'll push for that because this other one's taken too long, to be honest with you, because it's going to be, it's going to be years. I'm going to be retired and we're still going to be having this debate. I have a sick feeling in my stomach, not to be a pessimist, because I'm an optimist. But I will say this, if you could, next time we have this panel, bring somebody in.
We're losing you again, Coach. All right. If he doesn't come back, I'm going to move over. Okay. Eric Thomas, any final thoughts?
I'll actually give you a couple predictions here. Paul's back, so let him finish before I get there.
You want to wrap up, Paul? Did you have anything else?
No, I could talk for an hour, but I would say this. I would say it would be.
Oh,
apparently you can. Yeah, apparently you can.
I think debate would be great.
Okay. Thank you, Coach. Eric Thomas.
I'll give you a couple predictions. I think this will pass. I think that the PIAA is going to mandate a 2 to 3 year window to put all their ducks in a row, because they're going to have to figure out who's going to govern. If the private schools are going to still be under the PIAA, and we're going to kind of have like these 6 classes, but 2 are private and 4 are public, whatever they do, they're going to have to figure out if they can put another entity in like they had before that can oversee the private schools. And for the love of God, get rid of the competition formula. If that's going to help schools ease with the transfers and not have to worry about guys sitting out and things like that, at least for the short term, until they figure out something that's a little bit more permanent, then throw that thing out the window. If you separate these two, the competition formula doesn't matter anyway at that point. Competition formula, I think, has made 6A better in football because MOTEP is up there right now, but there's no punishment beyond 6A if you bring in about 6 transfers and go win a state title. So the rule to me is a moot thing anyway. It should be thrown out regardless if they separate. But if they do separate, you got to get rid of that thing. I think that would help public schools. But I do think that they'll have to take a 2 or 3 year window before they enact anything, just simply to get all their ducks in order and how they're going to police all these schools and bring all the private schools together, bring all the public schools together. Here's the groundwork for it. And then we'll start this maybe in like 2028 or something like that, 27 or 28.
Thank you very much. So have you been doing it long enough? Can we call you the voice of NFHS?
You can't call me the voice of anything. If the voice of anything, I'll take over Berman's spot. And be the voice of Delta.
Let me just tell you that Eric Thomas does, I guess, play-by-play is your forte. You can do either. You can do color too. For NFHS, the state championships, and does a great job. That's got to be a very kind of taxing, arduous to do 6 games in 3 days.
I love it.
Yeah, do you love it? Okay, good. So
it's good. It's great. Like when you have Jerry, probably doesn't remember me from 2020, but it's great when you have a guy like him that'll give you 45 minutes. And it's great when Paul, I've written stories about Paul in the past and Carlisle and all that, when I can call him on the phone on a Monday night and, we're BSing about stuff that has nothing to do with the game he's about to play. I appreciate all the coaches that take all the time. Coach Miller probably doesn't remember this either. I wrote a story about Dan Mullen when he was going to be in the running, we thought anyway, in the running to replace Joe Paterno. You helped me out with that. So all these coaches that are willing to take the time and help out and everything, it's greatly appreciated. It makes my life, my job a hell of a lot easier than what it probably should be.
All right, so let's thank once again 12th year West York head coach in the third year of his second stint. Ron Miller, our new friend, will have you back. Eric, we're going to have Coach Miller back when we do our high school football recap show. Coach Jerry Yanchuk, you're in your 6th season at Central York, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and get well soon. You look great, and
you look good.
And I'm going to come pick you up, and we're going to go walking down at Wildwood Park whenever you are feeling up
get
to
up
it.
to that pace.
Yep.
I'd be happy to.
And Coach Paul Blackburn, basketball coach Paul Blackburn, in his 17th year at Hershey High School, coming off of a state championship run, a 5A PIAA state championship run. And then once again, Eric Thomas, one of the better sports broadcasters, journalists in the state. You guys are awesome, man. That was so professional, smart takes. Nobody was piling on. Nobody was trying to kind of it was just a great show. I mean, I didn't know what we were going to get here tonight. I have to kind of watch myself too sometimes. And all we got was kind of, some solutions and some realities of what's going on with all this stuff. So let's just let me jump in and thank our sponsors one more time before I let you guys go. And they are Capital Region Insurance Agency, Crystal Bob at Iron Valley Real Estate, Payer Apparel, Tonino's Pizza, Hoffman Ford, Freedom Financial Wealth Management, The Tire Mart, Robert H. Hoke, Post 272, Team PA AAU Basketball, Rickabaz Electric, Underdog Sports Bar and Grill, Ted's Bar and Grill, Modern Imprint, and Sam Hartley Decking. Thank you once again to these local businesses for their continued support of Linglestown Gazette Sports and our area student athletes. Thank you, guys. We'll reconvene with everybody. You guys know that. I'll be reaching out sometime in the near future. We'll get you back on another show. Okay.
Great.
Thanks very much. Everybody enjoy your evening. Appreciate it.
Jerry, Godspeed. Be well. Pray for you, brother.
Take care.
Paul.